Okay, so I've got the building starting to come together, but obviously at the moment it's still just floating in space. I've done a little bit of the concrete outside the building, which would be basically the entry and the car park that you've got there. But I want the rest of the ground surface shown around this, and rather than using a floor for all of that, I'm going to put in a topo surface, which you have on the massing and site tab. So if you haven't looked at this one, I know you've looked at the massing tools, but then you'll see to the right you've got all the site modelling tools. And Revit has a pretty good setup for these things, as long as you're not doing civil engineering. This is all you'd ever need. So I'm going to go to the site floor plan, because it's set up to work with these elements. And then I'm just going to click on topo surface, and you'll see once you do, it will start off with place point as the option. So there are other ways you can make topo surfaces like the one you can see there in that preview using AutoCAD drawings. If you want a really complex 3D thing, that's a good way sometimes, or even using CSV files, which is an Excel type database or set of coordinates. But I'm just going to use this basic option, place points, and I'm not even going to make it a complex sloping site like you can see again in those images. I'm simply going to change the elevation there to -10, so that it goes down a little bit away from the building. And I'm going to click some points away from the building, out in space. 4 points will give me a basic ground surface. That is it. I might just really quickly show you what would happen if I change that height to say 2 metres. And if I click some points now, you'll see I'll get some contour lines to show me that it's sloping in that direction. So you can use it to make complex ground surfaces if you need it to, but usually for interior projects you don't need to show those things. So I'm just going to keep it flat. Having it a little bit below your floor doesn't hurt, to make sure the floor's always above it and showing clearly. And then I'll just tick to finish. And now you'll see in my section view, it's automatically got a ground line, nice and heavy. Wow. Ground hatch automatically put in there. In the elevation views as well. Now, have you been shown how you're meant to show elevation views with the ground line? It's a bit of an old convention. A lot of the old guys really harp on about this. Exactly. Yeah, that's the way you're supposed to do it. So there's a trick there in Revit, which I'll show you. Just select the topo surface, right-click, and then override graphics in view. Here, by element or by category would work. They'd both do the same thing here. And then you can go, it's not, you'd think it would be cut pattern. Normally it would be for other objects, but because of the type of thing this is, it's actually a surface pattern. Just turn it off, apply, there we go.
Wow. So then we can just add trees to that?
Exactly, that's it. So you need to do it in each elevation view if you want to turn that hatch off, so it doesn't take long. So just remember that it's a trick with topo surfaces. You'll see why later. It's the way that the material is set to a topo surface. It's a bit different to other objects. So in every elevation, I'm just going to go and override the graphics that way. Surface pattern off. And yeah, the nice thing with topo surfaces, if you change the height later and you put trees on previously, then the trees will move with the ground. So I'll just go in and do this last one. And then...
Just turn it off in the elevation.
Exactly.
And the section still have.
Exactly, that's right, yeah. Right, so now, in the site view again, if you want to use that site plan, you probably don't want to see the edge of this ground surface because it's not straight apart from anything else. So crop it by just turning on the crop region. So make sure you know about those two buttons there for your crop region visibility and cropping itself. And then you can use that border to bring in the edge and crop out parts you don't want. Another good trick there, if you want to see the side edge again, you can just disable cropping. It'll leave the border there, but it'll show you what's around it. And
What happens if you render it like?
it'll render with the ground now. Actually, that's a good point. I'm going to go on to the setting the material. So I'll turn cropping back onto this one. And I've got, remember, the site that I had with the image.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm going to break this up and have some different materials. But that's a good point. I'm going to go, the way materials work with these is a bit different. So in this one that I've got with the image, I'll set it to wireframe so I can see through the ground. And then I can start tracing over the road. And to do that, you'll see next to your model site panel, you've got this modify site panel where you've got split surface, which is a good one, but that's not what I want here. The other one is sub-region, and that's probably the better option most of the time, because that lets you break up the site to have different materials, but it's still all the one ground surface. With split surface, it'll break it apart into separate ground surfaces, which then behave as separate objects. So I'm going to use sub-region. And then I'm simply going to draw a line. I'm not going to be too fussy about this. So I'll draw a line for the first for the curb. So it's about there. Maybe a bit, oh no, sorry, it's got the driveway here. Well, I'll just take it all the way down for now. We'll come back and change it later. Coming across. Again, not being too fussy. So that's my footpath. Tick to finish. You can see I didn't worry about drawing in line with the edge. It'll work it out. And then I'm going to again use another sub-region for the footpath on the other side. So again, just very roughly. And tick to finish. So then in the 3D view, I've got this site with the different areas. Now that's not quite straight, so I'll just, or not quite parallel, so I'll go back to the another view where I can see that, and it's easy to then select those sub-regions and edit boundary to adjust those lines. You can see it's all a bit rough when you do it this way. And the other problem with sub-regions is that you can't snap to them. So I can draw them no problem, but then if I want to go and draw something else, even just another sub-region, you'll see it will actually pick up edges sometimes, but it can be difficult to get it to do much more than that. So it's not a bad idea to put in reference planes, which I'll do now. And I'm going to copy that reference plane across a few times just to help me keep it a bit neater. And I'm copying the reference planes because offsetting reference planes is a bit fiddly. Okay, so now I can select those sub-regions and again, edit boundary. And then I can just use a line and line those edges up with my reference planes. So again, I'll just fix this one up. Okay, so that should be a lot neater when I finish it. There we go. But they're all still the same material. And so then what you'll see with topo surfaces is that they have a material. When you select it, in properties, it'll come up with a material, and you can see there it's set to by category. And I'll choose that and then browse and set a material to it. So you'll have some site materials to get you started. Well, we've got one here, site hardcore. That probably can be my main, well, it's the driveway material, we'll call it. So I'll duplicate this and maybe call it pavement. That's it. And the cut pattern doesn't matter. You won't ever see the cut pattern with a material on a topo surface. So don't even worry about that. Just going to go to appearance, and you can see there generic 2 is being used by a stack of other materials. That's what the 7 means there. 7 other materials are using it. I don't know what they are, so I'm going to replace that using that replace button with a material from the appearance library here. On plus, you'll see there's a site work folder. Okay, so I've got all these different basic site type materials, and so one of the asphalt materials there will be fine. And back on the graphics tab, I'll just tick user render appearance to pick up the colour. And so that's set the main material for my topo surface. Actually, so that should have been left on hardcore, so that's fine. I'll change it to hardcore, and let's see what its appearance is. So it's also using a funny one. I'll change that to, well, actually, let's give it a better name. So I'll duplicate this as well, and I'll call that site, well, it's really the drive, so I'll call it drive, or driveway. And again, same process, replace it with a better render material. So one of these asphalts again should be fine. Render appearance, and it's dark enough, I think. So that's set the main topo surface material, and then these two sub-regions, just use Control to select them both. I can set them to have a different material, and that's where I'll use my pavement material. And then we want the road to be yet another material. So I need to go back and make another sub-region. Back on massing and site, sub-region, and here you'll see it really helps to have those reference planes. I can just pick them now. Connect the ends. Here, I'll just trim it. Okay, so that'll allow me to pick just that part in the middle, which I can set to my, well, I'll make a new road material. So again, duplicate one of these, and site road will do. Appearance, replace, find your site work folder, and one of the asphalt, the darker ones there will be good. Yep, all good. And then, just want to show you in section, if I've got one that goes through the road. I probably don't, so I'll make one. And I'll just actually stretch this one out, just so you can see a bit more about how this topo surface works. Right, so in section now, that's where the road is, but you can see it's all still using that earth hatch, which is a nice way of doing it. It's set up like that deliberately. And just again, so you can see how it works, on this model site tab, you'll see there's a little arrow at the end. And when you click there, that's where you'll find the setting for that earth material. So that's like a global setting. And it's a good way of doing it. You don't want to have all the different materials on your site surface to come up in the section.
But you could have had the image on wireframe when building the site.
Yep.
And lowered it by another -10 for the footpath, -20 for the road.
Oh yeah, if you want to do it like that, you can. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
If you wanted to see it in section.
Exactly.
Like where the street is.
That's right. Yeah, you can. Yep. So I can still do that now because it's all still the one ground surface.
Because it might be appropriate for like a basement apartment.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yep. Yep. So for this project, I don't think you need to show that detail, but yeah, it's a good idea for some others. Yeah, definitely. So that's all you need to know for the topo surface, but then I'll just show you a few site features. Now that we've got a topo surface, I can put in, again, back in my site plan, you'll see again on that same massing and site tab, you've got site component, and you can use that to quickly place trees. It just selects those trees for you automatically. It's like a filter for your components. Actually, I'll go to the one with the image, and then back to site component. I can hopefully line this up pretty well with the trees I can see in the image. And these trees are all photo based, so when you render, they come up like a photo. If you want to get more, you can go to load family, planting, and so let's try the other one, tree fall. So they're mostly Northern Hemisphere, but you can find things that are close enough to the trees we've got here. Put a few in there. That's maybe not big enough. Okay, so let's get a few different trees there. That might do. And one more. Okay, so then in 3D, all the trees we can see. Maybe this one's a bit large. We'll have to maybe try another one there. Right, so we don't want them going into the building. If you go to realistic, in your shading modes or your graphic options, it'll show you how it's going to render. And so this is the same with people and other things that are RPC based. So yeah, they render really well. They're basically from a few photos they've taken in different directions. And yeah, and so if you haven't tried that with the RPC people, I'll just quickly show you those. With component, load family, in Entourage, you've got these two RPC files, male and female. And so let's go for this one. And so make sure you look at the types where you can see the 4 different males, and there are, I think, 5 females. So I'll just place one over here. And well, let's flip him around. Spacebar will flip. And so they are photo based, just like the trees. Right, they're a little bit generic, but they give you something. And then maybe just to show you some other site features you can put in, and you can get a lot of your site plans done this way. With, again, massing in site, you've got parking components, which will let you put in car spaces, and that'd be a good thing to show for this project. And so we know we've got some underneath the building here. It's hard to see that in the site plan, so maybe I'll go to the ground floor plan and then try again. So I think you've got 2 car spaces in that bay. Oh yeah, so yeah, and 2 in between the columns. I think it is anyway. So hopefully we can fit those in. And so it just makes the project look a lot more complete when you have all these things showing. Maybe nudge them over a bit. You can even have disabled and other things showing there. I might just line those up. And they do show up in 3D as well. So in the 3D view, the tree's in the way. Let's go back to shaded, and then so you can see the car spaces, which unfortunately all come up with a disabled symbol. It's in the type. I think that's turned on by mistake, or is it in the instance? Yeah, here we go. So in the properties for each of those, you can turn that symbol off. There we are. And you can even put a car in there. You've got cars in the same entourage folder, so with component, load family, entourage, and the Beetle's a pretty good one because it's RPC, so it renders like a photo. Looks pretty bad in shaded, but with realistic, it's a lot better. No, unfortunately, it's all. Oh, you may have a material for it, but I doubt it. That's. Oh, wait, no, they could have set it up. Let's see. No, not much. Well, let's see. Yeah. So the other cars aren't quite as good. RPC is a proprietary format. It's a company called ArcVision that make all of these things, and they give a few to you as a sample with the program, but otherwise you have to pay for the rest. But some of these others are okay. So space to flip, and let's put one in there. So it renders a bit more like a wireframe model. But if you want to get an idea how it looks without the all the lines, in your graphic display options, you can try turning the edges off to make it look a bit better. And right, so I've got this view starting to slow down a bit because it's realistic, and now we've got all these detailed elements in there. So I might just duplicate that view and rename it and call it 3D realistic, something like that. And then the other one I'll put back to shaded because it's much faster to work with it in shaded mode. So the edges are still turned off. You can turn those back on if you want to, but yeah, otherwise I'll maybe just do a quick perspective to give you an idea how that's going to look now. So with basic camera, looking towards the building, stretch the field of view out, set it to realistic, and it's starting to look a bit more like the real thing. Maybe again get rid of the edges. And so even without rendering you can get some okay displays. Yeah, so that's really all you need, I think, for your site. But sorry, there are a couple of other little things. North. So luckily this one is pretty close to the right orientation already, but it does need to be still rotated a little bit. And in your site with image, you've actually, if you've inserted the satellite image, you've already stored the north direction because the side of the page is pointing towards north. That's the way, yeah, Google Maps are. So I'll draw a reference plane along that edge. And now in my true north view, which doesn't have the image, I'll see that reference plane. Okay, so if you haven't set north for a little while, I'll just remind you about that. On the Manage tab, you have Rotate True North. Okay, so drag your base point onto the reference plane, snap to it, and then you can bring it around to vertical, which will make the reference plane straight. That should be pointing to north in the true north view, and it won't change in the other views, which is how it should be. You want these to stay.
I think I missed how to do that.
So it's under here, you've got Rotate True North,
Yeah.
and you've got to do it in the true north view. So,
Right.
so I'll undo it, I'll do it again.
And then rotate the reference plane.
Basically, yeah, that's right. Rotate using the reference plane, yeah, to snap to. So, yep,
Yeah. Okay.
yep. Okay, so the real trick is to get that base point onto the reference plane first, snap to it to set your base angle, and then bring it around so it snaps to vertical. And so that's actually a useful view because it's handy sometimes to have a view that's oriented to north. The other site plan is still the way it was, which is again how we want it. And that means if I go into any other view and set the sun in sun settings to still, it's already got the location so it knows where you are, and then you can set I'll turn the ground plane off, and so now it's going to use the angle of the real sun. Let's go for summer, and so that's changing the lighting. With shadows on, it's a bit clearer. So the building's overshadowed there, but if we go back into sun settings now, and as I adjust the time and then hit apply, you'll see it's going to change. So in the afternoon, we'll get more sun onto the face of the building.
So the building actually faces north.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, exactly, that's right.
So it'd be pretty sunny in the summer.
Yeah, it would, yep, definitely, yep. Yeah, in the afternoon anyway, yep, that's right. So the very, very final thing I promised with site plans. You'll have other things that you probably want to show on your site plan, especially if it's a site analysis plan. So I would think about cropping it back to show only the parts you need. Maybe something like this. Hide, elevation views if you don't need them. And I might make it shaded. And then anything that you don't want to model in 3D, you can always draw using detail lines that you've got on the Annotate tab, and you can just draw 2D lines over the top of your site plan. So if you want to draw, public transport or, well, even text as well is annotation. So again, you've got the text tool on that tab. And so for things like the street name, which is essential. Okay, so I'll make this Euston Road. Rotate it around. Move it. Maybe I'll make that. Oh, sure, okay, now I see it. So I'll just make that box a bit smaller. And if you're thinking that text is too small, it's 5mm, which isn't that small. But for actually, we'll get it to go the other way though. But for things like street names, maybe it could be a little larger. Wants to snap to vertical, unfortunately, so I'm just rotating it gradually, and then I'll set it to maybe 12mm is okay for something like a street name. You want that to be really prominent, and then hopefully it'll be a bit easy. Yeah, you probably could actually. Let's see. I've never tried that with text. Probably won't want to do it, but let's give it a go. No, it's annoying. It wants to go to vertical, and actually for something like this, it's not so bad to have it just as straight text. But the real secret there is using the scale to get the size worked out as well, because it's still 1 to 100. So if I make it 1 to 200, then you'll see the size. Yeah, and that's, so 12mm maybe is a bit big, and maybe back to 6 or 7 would be what you want. It doesn't hurt to put a space between these for things like street labels. That's a good way. Alright, so site plans normally would be at 1 to 200. And again, I'll try it very fiddly when you need to just rotate text. Yeah. Okay, so if it's giving you problems when you try to rotate it, you can still use the rotate tool and type in an angle, like 1. There we go. Or let's do that again and do it again, 1. And that's close enough. So, and that's really the secret with things like site analysis plans. Put as much descriptive text as you can. So a lot of things, people often will try to draw them with a lot of detail for site analysis plans and make them into a really time-consuming thing, when really you can just describe a lot of those elements.
So for example, the building itself would be a rectangle with
a note, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yep. So just think about those things, and that really is all you need for your site plans.